In Africa, we hold our destiny in our own hands. The Africa Evidence Network brings together voices committed to evidence-informed decision-making, EIDM, across the continent.
Got frustrated by this idea that it was a kind of deficit model. Either I'm lacking something, or other colleagues across the continent are lacking something, and somehow we need someone who's going to fly in from the US or the UK to train us. And I did that once. I was one of those trainers, and I've also been the recipient of that kind of training. And it's just frustrating. It doesn't take into account or respect the expertise that's already in the room.
I really saw it as more like an opportunity to learn, and specifically to contribute to shaping how we understand capacities in the African context. I was particularly inspired by the chance to help highlight African-led innovation.
What is it that is our sense of belonging? What is it that, I think, firstly, visionary? What is kind of that vision, that dream that we want to say, this is what would be wonderful to have in evidence capacities? But then also, secondly, as a call for action, what will it look like? What is the principles, the people, the processes that would inform that?
We all talk about capacity building. We all talk about capacity development. We start talking also about capacity sharing. But for the EIDM, evidence-informed development, making a space, this is something that is not very common, I would say. We were not very clear about what we meant by capacity in the ecosystem. It was taking different forms. People are using different principles, different approaches. So an exercise to try to formalize and standardize the different elements that could be considered as capacity sharing or capacity development or capacity building in the EIDM was something that is needed for the whole ecosystem.
Born out of the shared desire to transform how evidence is used, the AEN Manifesto on Capacity Development emerged as a declaration of African-led solutions.
When it comes to capacity development in our African context, I think it's very important to consider three different stages. The first being the situation we are in right now. The targets would then be experts, youngsters who are involved in evaluation, but who comes in with their own capacities, and therefore we need to contribute to develop their capacities. And in that respect, I consider technical capacities as a very essential aspect of capacity building, but also leadership capacities as quite critical in order to advance whatever we generate as evidence in the realm of policy formulation. And the third one would be capacities regarding fundraising in order to do more than what is prescribed by funding organization. That's how I see the very first component of capacity building on the continent.
I think one thing that's really important for me, and that's still under-recognized, I think, is the importance of recognizing capacity development as a holistic, multi-level systems kind of concept. Too often capacity development gets reduced to being only about individual skills and training, even though many of us know that, but it's something that is still a common misconception. So for me, first and foremost, capacity development is holistic, it's multi-level, it's both formal and informal. The other thing I'd say that I think the manifesto really captures well is that capacity exists among all stakeholders in African and in other evidence ecosystems. So among researchers, evidence producers, intermediaries, evidence users, everybody needs capacity. We all need capacity to kind of work productively together at this interface, between evidence production and use.
Capacity development, I would define it as efforts that look at and ensuring that individuals, institutions within government and beyond, the ability to find, analyze, use, and consider the evidence they need for decision making.
Capacity development in the African context involves recognizing and addressing structural inequities that can shape whose knowledge counts. It isn't just about building technical skills, it's also about creating more equitable ecosystems where Africans, individual and an institution, aren't only consumers of global evidence, but also influential producers and agenda setters. All in all, I think it's about strengthening the ability of individuals, organizations, and systems to generate, share, and use evidence in ways that are meaningful and relevant to African own priorities.
From capacity building to capacity sharing, we focus on nurturing, not imposing.
You can't do capacity building without doing capacity sharing. I think it could be some issue about terminology, you know. But when you talk about capacity buildings, capacity generations, you also have to share some knowledge. Why? Because you cannot build capacity without sharing your own capacity. It's like you bring in what was past experience from elsewhere, and then learning from those who are listening to you, and in the meantime also improve your own capacity.
Citizens and communities, as well as other marginalized user communities, right, should be the focus of shaping, you know, our different interventions, in that they should be the targets, right, that we are aiming our practice to help transform their lives and livelihoods. So we don't need to operate indifferently towards them, but that we need to co-create and conceptualize some of these interventions with them and not necessarily for them.
Much of the way that capacity development was being done was kind of directed in some ways by what funders were valuing or were used to, rather than perhaps what we in Africa felt was relevant. So the need to unpack this, discuss it, make some commitments and implement those led to discussions around the need for a manifesto. It was a response to, in many ways, a collective reflection and a consultation on capacity building in Africa with AEN members, but also in a sense that reflects community engagement in practice.
Quand on parle de capacity sharing, les capacités sont partagées et il y a un élément de co-construction qu'on dénote à travers le capacity sharing. Et ce changement, on peut le dire, est fondamental dans le contexte africain où les savoirs locaux, souvent invisibles ou souvent pas documentés suffisamment, doivent être reconnus comme légitimes, comme faisant partie de nos réalités, faisant partie de nos contextes et doivent pouvoir compter pour le design des évaluations, pour le design de comment nous produisons, comment nous utilisons également la donnée.
From researchers and civil servants to communities and intermediaries, everyone plays a role.
The best capacity development initiatives I've been part of have actually not even been called capacity development. They've been relationship building initiatives. They've been opportunities through the Africa Evidence Network to work with colleagues Impacts Africa and colleagues in eBase, in TEDI, in Tanzania, all sorts of different partnerships where I've learned so much from others, and I hope I've been able to share some of my experiences.
The value of all of us learning from each other as opposed to one person coming to, build the capacity of another one is important and has been critical for us in the work that I do at AFIDEP, that we are not looking like we are the ones going to build somebody else's capacity, but we are all learning and building our capacities to better understand evidence, better understand government context and the politics within it, so that we are also better able to design interventions that work for them. So it's us learning from them and them learning from us, and then together we are able to strengthen the relationships and the institutional process that enable evidence use.
I believe Africa is kind of like similar in context. The things you find in Ghana, you'll find in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Sierra Leone. So to me, the manifesto is very valuable in that it can help us collaborate and bring together innovations that can be applied across different African regions, thereby minimizing duplicative efforts, wastage of resources, and ensure that there is sustainability by leveraging on already established and initiatives that have been proven to be effective.
For me, effective capacity sharing is grounded in a few key values: critical thinking, sharing curiosity about what others bring to the table, being open to different perspectives and respecting diverse approaches. It's also about building on the knowledge and experience that's already there, rather than sharing from scratch. And also important, it's about keeping the process hands-on and practical.
So just including you by the table might still not help you really, because you just have a seat there, but it's not your system. So for me, it's way more important to think, but how do we rethink what's in the room? So I think we really want to ensure just evidence ecosystems. That really means that everyone that wants has a role to play and shape the evidence ecosystem, and not just include people in what we've already set.
Equity, inclusivity, and collaboration are not just values. They are practices embedded in our processes.
Le développement des capacités, le renforcement des capacités ne se décrète pas, il se cultive, il se construit. Et pour cela, il exige une lecture fine des contextes, une attention aux subjectivités et un engagement profond pour des pratiques transformatrices. Nous devons sortir d'une logique de formation-réplication pour entrer dans une ère de co-apprentissage, de co-construction, de mutualisation des connaissances et de réciprocité.
And I think we have to think about the future of capacity development, or just capacity in general in Africa, not being about a transfer of skills. It's about a transformation of systems. We must move from isolated training to building inclusive, interconnected systems and interconnected ecosystems, where I think our African institutions, our practitioners, our policymakers and communities are co-creating, are governing, and sustaining our own kind of evidence agendas.
We will see a lot of progress in terms of how we deploy a number of capacity development programs. And we are hoping that this will be part of the discussions at Evidence 2025. So we invite all the participants to come with their bright ideas, with what they think we could be doing for improving how we approach the capacity development in Africa. How do we root it in our realities, and how do we also how do we keep our minds open to the different digital development happenings? How do we make sure that we can use all of that to improve the capacity development outcomes on the continent?
Funders do not dictate research questions, but rather are kind of more like open to listening to researchers who are deeply embedded in communities, researchers who understand the local needs and priorities and are able to reflect those in their proposal. So Otherwise, I personally believe if that inclusivity is not there, there is a high risk that researchers are doing research for funding rather than getting funding to do research. So I believe that is also very important in terms of inclusivity, in terms of power, what's power in terms of funding and proposal.
We need to live the manifesto, that it's not just a living document, but it is us living the manifesto.
We envision a thriving, interconnected evidence ecosystem that responds to Africa's needs and aspirations.
Join us. Share the vision. Shape the future.